الطيبين الطاهرين. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There seems to be a schism in the Muslim world at the moment, wherever you go to travel, about the permissibility of visiting graveyards such as this, number one. Number two, about the permissibility of seeing a dome on top of someone's grave. Number three, about asking for your needs from someone who is dead. And so if you travel the Muslim world today, in the Sunni world and the Shia world, you will find that there is a difference of opinion as to whether such an act is permissible or not. As in, when you come to certain countries, you will find them saying that you're more than welcome not only to visit a grave, but you should also erect a darih on top of the grave, and you should have a dome, and you can ask the supplications you want from the person who is buried within the grave. So, if you go to Egypt, those of you who've been to Cairo, if you go to Cairo, you'll find the mosque, which they say is where Imam al-Hussein's head is kept. If you go to Cairo, you'll find a mosque where they say Sayyida Zainab is buried. If you go to Cairo, you'll see a mosque where Nafisa, the great granddaughter of Imam al-Hassan, who married Ishaq, the son of Imam al-Sadiq, is buried. The Egyptians will all go to these graves, not just visit the graves, no, they'll stand by the grave, hold the darih of the grave. And they'll actually ask for their hajat, where they will say, Ya Allah, I ask you in the name of the one buried in the grave. The reasoning is, of course, because Egyptians, the majority of them, are of Shafi'i faith, the Shafi'i school within the religion of Islam. And so they have a number of textbooks which recommend the importance of the visitation of the graves, and that those who are buried within the graves are not dead, rather they are alive, because those who die in the way of Allah are not dead, they are alive. So if you go to Egypt, you'll see this. Even in the land of Iraq, you will see this as well. In the land of Iraq, there are many different schools of jurisprudence. The Sufis have a school, the Hanafis have a school, the Ja'faris have a school. And so when we go and visit Baghdad, would you believe, within the parameters of Baghdad, you're going to visit Imam Musa ibn Ja'far and Imam al-Jawad. And you're going to visit as well Imam, or those who can visit or want to visit, Imam Abu Hanifa, who's literally across the bridge, he's buried from Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. And you can also go and visit Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, who's also buried there in Baghdad. Nobody in Iraq prevents you from going to these graves, visiting them, and asking for your prayers from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from these places. Nobody prevents you at all. So in Iraq, there isn't so much of a schism. A Hanafi or a Ja'fari all will go to a graveyard or to a grave and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the name of the one buried there. Where there's a major problem, as you all know, is in Saudi Arabia. And in Saudi Arabia, you will notice that even though over here there may be a sort of reference given to even the people buried here by erecting a sort of dome or a darih, over there such a thing is prohibited, as in barring the Holy Prophet. Everything else is prohibited. And even with the Holy Prophet, if they had the chance, they'd destroy that as well. But it's an Ottoman origin grave, and they really couldn't come and destroy it because it would be too blatant in the hatred of the Holy Prophet. So, when we come towards these graves, and if someone was to ask us, are we allowed, are we sanctioned within the religion of Islam, like how do we actually explain what is happening here? Because if we say Prophet Saleh or Prophet Hud are buried here, what's the need for erecting this mosque and inside a darih? Or likewise, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, why couldn't we just add a piece of dust with a rock on top? The first base many of the scholars will use for why you're allowed to do this is the story of Ashab al-Kahf. Ashab al-Kahf, after they returned back to the cave, there were two search parties that went out to look for them. One search party that went out to look for them said that we'll build on top of them like a darih, which we have today. The second search party said, لَنَتَّخِذَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ مَسْجِدًا. Not only will we build this edifice, no, we're going to actually build a mosque on top. And that's why when you go in here, what do you find? You'll find that there's a mosque on top of the darih. So for anyone who comes to ask you, what is the basis in the Quran for you erecting a mosque on top of someone who is buried? Because you know, sometimes someone will say this is shirk. Because if you're praying to the one who's buried, they say to you, isn't it? They'll say, why are you praying to the one who's buried? Say the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَالَ الَّذِينَ غَلَبُوا عَلَىٰ أَمْرِهِمْ لَنَتَّخِذَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ مَسْجِدًا. Those who were victorious in their affair said, we will build on top of them a mosque. Had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala felt that this was wrong, He would have condemned it as an act of shirk, isn't it? Even now, my brothers in Saudi Arabia, those of you who've been to Medina, you see where Rasulullah's grave is? If you face the Qibla, Rasulullah's grave is on your left-hand side. If you're facing the Qibla, those of you who will be standing, you'll find that his grave is towards the left. The Imam is praying there. If people are facing towards the Qibla and there's a human being who's buried there, someone may turn around and accuse you of committing shirk. No. On the contrary, we give the benefit of the doubt for the niyyah of the person. In Salah we say, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. We have to say this. Otherwise, we may even fall into this problem. And that's why the verse in the Quran, which they often use to prove their point, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُ مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. They'll use the verse in the Quran in Surah 72 verse 18. The mosques are for Allah. Do not call anyone besides Allah. They say, look, you people go to these mosques, you call on Ali and Hussein. Quran says you only call on Allah. No, that verse was revealed to warn the people of a practice which was happening in Ethiopia, in the Christian world, where Habiba says, we saw churches where they had placed pictures on top of the grave. If you notice, when you go to the Haram of Imam Ali, do you see Imam Ali's picture on top of his grave? You may see them on sale in the roads, but the scholars do not sanction a picture on the top of the grave of Imam. Why? Because when you're doing your salah and you see this face, which is not his real face, this is a historical depiction. When you see that face, you may forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and focus on the face. So the origin of that verse, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ, was warning people that the mosques are for Allah. These Christians, what they start doing, putting pictures on top of graves. When they come and pay their respects to the Prophet who's in that grave in Ethiopia, Habiba, the wife of Rasulullah, says all of a sudden, they weren't just paying respects, they were doing sujood towards the grave with a picture. Rasulullah in Mecca, who knows the name of the graveyard in Mecca we all visit? Jannatul Mu'alla, well done. That graveyard in Mecca is where Sayyidah Khadija and where Abu Talib, amongst others, are buried. In that graveyard, Rasulullah, when he was in Mecca, there's a hadith which says that he says, I prohibit you from visiting the graves. And it's true, there is a hadith in Mecca where Rasulullah prohibited people from visiting the graves. Because these people, instead of coming to visit the graves to honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to remind themselves of death, they were coming to visit the graves to talk to each other about how many family members they have in the graveyard. Quran says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرِ. What's a maqabir? If the qabr is one grave, maqabir is how many? A number of graves, isn't it? Quran says your numbers have overcome you when you go and visit the graveyards. Today, when you get to this grave, or you go to your graveyard in your local mosque, how many of you have fallen in that trap? You go to the graveyard, you know, we have him there, and she's buried there, and he's there, and she's there, and he's there, and she's there, and he's there, and we have him there. What is it, a competition for how many people are buried in the graveyard? When I come to the graveyard,
وَصَلِّ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِهِ وَاغْفِرْهَا لِي يا سيدنا توجه بك وبأهل بيتك إلى الله تعالى ربك وربي ليغفر لي إنا لله